going to be in Job. We're going to finish the book of Job. I'm so excited to get to be, at least one of the weeks with you in Job, because this is a fantastic book. Just as a kind of a question, how's everybody doing with the reading? I know, you're in it, guys. If you made it, this is like you've crossed over to where going backwards doesn't make sense. You got to just keep going forward. We're so close. So keep on reading. Keep on, Bible app, on the Bible app, in the plan. Every day it's got our reading for the day. Just stick with it. I promise you it's going to be worth it. Is this anybody's first time reading through the whole Old Testament? Quite a few. It's awesome. I love it. That's great. And man, you will be able to judge others like nobody else. And I think you just have to own, no, I'm just kidding. It is true though. You're like, oh, have you read the Bible? Oh, I've read the Bible. Yeah. But it is something, joking aside, I know that's not the reasoning and all, but it's something special about having the full context. And being in the pace that we're at is really helpful too, I promise you. It seems hard, but when you slow down, you lose the pace and the big context of what's happening. So I promise you, this is a good way to go. So we're going to look at Job 20 to the end. I'm going to focus in chunks rather than in chapters because the themes are bigger than any one particular chapter. As a reminder, this is arguably the oldest book that we have of the Bible. So we're dating, you're in the days of either Abraham or pre-Abraham. So we've gone way back. So the Bible's not written it's not exclusively chronological, okay? The goal of the Bible was not to make sure everybody got the story from birth to death. That's not the purpose. So we're in the section of what we call wisdom books, and Job kind of falls into this narrative, but it is also extremely in the wisdom books. I would recommend, then I'll take a question. I would really recommend if you are a reader besides the Bible, or if you like Audible. Anybody Audible people? Some of you Audibles? That's great. There's a great book. The name is gone. No. The author's name is Peter Kreeft. 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 Now, when you look him up, you're going to be scandalized because he is a Catholic philosopher, also the head of philosophy at Boston University. Been there forever, or maybe he's not there, maybe he's dead. I have no idea. It's a long time ago. But Peter Kreeft, he's got a book on Job, Psalms, and Ecclesiastes, and it's fantastic. I'd stick with the Bible if you're not a big reader. Stick at it. But if you like, I just like to give recommendations. You like to read. Yes, sir.
Okay. Last week.
What did he mess up? Go ahead. Just kidding. Okay, crazy question. Bring the heat. Let's go. I'm with Carlos, but go ahead. Yeah, keep going. No, keep going.
But here's where I'm a little confused.
Sure.
And this what you just said might help. If this is pre-Abrahamic, could this be pre-Satan being cast?
No. No, that's a great question, though. Thank you for asking it. That's a good question. But the answer is no.
Does your understanding of the Bible say that Satan has power over life and death? Because he asked God, you have everything, you can do anything.
The answer is no. No, he still does not have power over life and death.
Okay, so I'm finally down to my question.
Oh, okay. I'm just answering like crazy. Let's go.
So, to test Job's faith, God allowed his children to be killed in the,
Yes.
in the storms.
Yep.
So, what is that?
God's permissive will. God allowed something. It was in his control to give. The Bible says life is in God's hands. So only God can give and take. Ultimately, and now, you want to know what makes Job so difficult? Because that's the truth. It would be easier to tell you, yes, Satan killed him. Because then you can just blame the devil. It's a worse fate to realize God's in control and he knew what was going to happen. Because then you question the goodness of God. So it's a really good question. But no, the devil does not have that kind of power. He remains under the realm of God. And but he, in the book of Job, is given a kind of freedom that we don't see in the normal sense of the word. Definitely not, It's also that reminder, you don't want God bragging about you. That's just a reminder. Just remain mediocre, my friends. Remain mediocre, and God will never brag on you. No. I was opening my phone because as I get a little bit further in, Kyle sent me a question. Yes, if you don't know who Kyle is, he's our mascot. He's our spirit animal here. Yes, he's here, present, and he sent it in an audio so we get to hear Kyle. Yeah, so we can hear Kyle wander around the question. And he's watching. He's not watching live because we don't put it up live, but when it goes up. So, Kyle, we love you. We love you and Anna. And everybody's thinking. You guys want to shout to Kyle? Go ahead. Ready? Go. They'll love that. I don't know if the mic works like that, but anyway, it's dead silence. He's like, okay. But super exciting. So we're into Job, and obviously, if you were here last week or if you've been tracking with it, you've been following what's been happening. It's a tremendous book on the concept of suffering. I was joking with somebody earlier. They're like, "Oh, I think I'm going to come." And they're like, "Oh, I don't know if I can make it." I'm like, "Well, I'm going to answer the question of suffering tonight. You should be there." And they're like, "Really?" I'm like, "No, that was a joke. There is no answer to the question of suffering, not on this side of heaven." But it's a fantastic book that walks us through a very you've got the devil involved in things. You've got human suffering. It's just a lot of things happening. So I want to do my best to go through the book or the end parts. I want to focus on the first section is chapters 20 to 27. Okay, the first section that I'm from here is these final conversations that Job has with his friends. And by the way, the word friend is unique, right, isn't it, in this context? Because it's like, are they really, though? And I would say they really are. These guys are they're having, let's just be real, let me say it, they're having non-Western, non-Eastern, they're having ancient civilization conversations. You say everything. There's no boundaries. There's no, like, if you've ever lived in any other culture, like Eastern culture, like, they'll look at a picture of you and you're like, "Oh, wow. You look healthy." No, that's Western. But in other cultures, they'll just say it, right? They'll just say how you look, and so like this is more of a you're going deep into human civilization where relational boundaries and things like that just that were not a part of life, and so everybody's struggling to survive. Everything was community. So these kinds of conversations would have been. We're supposed to read this to say this is norm. It wasn't unique, it was quite norm. So in chapters 20 and 21, the names don't matter, but Zophar and Job talk about the fate of the wicked. Zophar argues that the prosperity of the wicked is short-lived and that they will eventually face divine retribution, right? We like the concept, right? Hey, the wicked are short-lived and eventually they're going to get punished for it. Job counters that message. And he says, he observes that the wicked often live very long, prosperous lives. And so what this is there's a challenge to a very simplistic view of retribution. There's a view that I want to have by a show of amens. Don't you want to believe that the wicked they will be short-lived and they'll get their due right away, right? Okay. Happy birthday to me, all right? Okay. So, but then there's the reality of that, right? And what you observe is something different. And so immediately Job and Zophar are on different sides of that. The significance of this dialogue, it highlights the tension between a kind of traditional belief that the wicked should get punished right away. And the challenge to that is who determines wickedness? That's the challenge. Who determines it? Because you see, I have an accommodation for my evil in ways I don't have accommodation for somebody else's evil. So then who becomes the standard of, now again, we're all going to say, it's God. Okay, fair. But we're talking into the world where there's no concepts yet. And there's still issues of that. So you just need to keep that this is the conversation Zophar and Job are having. In chapters 22, 23, and 24, the other guy comes back in, Eliphaz, and he's making accusation, right? He intensifies his accusations. He's suggesting that Job, in these chapters, he suggests that Job is suffering because of secret sin. Don't raise your hand. Don't nudge anybody. But haven't we suffered sometimes and we look back and we go, oh yeah, there was things going on in my life that created hardship. So to assume that is very, it's not a big jump. It's not a big jump to assume something like that. But then Job defends his integrity. And he's kind of like, where is God when you need him to defend you? Where is divine justice? The significance of these three chapters, 22, 23, 24, is that they are opening up for you and me the disconnect between human expectations of justice and human observations of lived experience. There's what I believe should happen by God, and then there's what is going on. So they're circling the same themes, by the way. But they're doing it in different forms. Have you ever found that you circle around the same idea, but it comes from different angles at times in our lives? I'm doing good, so I'm circling certain ideas. Even when I'm doing bad, I might be circling the same ideas, but from another perspective. And Eliphaz opens up these other perspectives. Chapters 25, 26, and 27, the third friend, Bildad, and he begins with a reiteration. He's like, God is great. There was a clear understanding in Job and his friends of the greatness of God and how small humanity is and almost insignificant. Job responds to this idea by affirming his own righteousness and his friends' inability to comfort him. He restates his own desire to understand God's reasoning behind suffering. These guys are all over the place. If you're going to get anything out of Job, not anything, if you're going to get one thing out of the book of Job, I also want you to get, and it's actually going to be the question Kyle's going to ask, I'm precursoring, we didn't reach his point yet, but I'll get there soon. Not everything these men say is correct. There's a misnomer that if it's in the Bible, it must be true, and that is untrue. This is the narrative of conversation. And as a narrative of conversation, this is just the written expression of what these men said back and forth to each other. It didn't make them right. Okay? Now, it becomes significantly difficult, and that's why it's kind of a fun book. It's why it's actually one of the most, in terms of Bible books, in secular education, it's one of the most used books in secular education. You'll see more references into Job quite often. And unfortunately, Job, it's also where a majority of cults get their information from too. So it's kind of a mixed bag. It's a really difficult book. Like if somebody were to say to me, I've been circling around this new concept and idea, and then I were to say, well, where are you getting this from? And they were to begin with, from the book of Job, I'm going to try to not roll my eyes, but in my mind, I'm rolling my eyes. It's not a good book to begin as a foundation for some new idea that you're having, especially when we're told there's nothing new under the sun. Thank you. Thank you, my Bubba. I appreciate it. So I need you to think about it like this, like just because they're having the conversations and exploring these different ideas about God's righteousness and human suffering and justice, it doesn't mean that they're right. Now, let me frustrate you to a new level of frustration. Even when God speaks, he doesn't answer some of the questions these guys ask. He answers some of them, but not all of them. And I'm just going to say that the reason for that is because there is not an answer to the specifics of every element of suffering. Nothing that would, not only would it not do good for us, but it doesn't have an answer. Not on this side of eternity. So it's like you're talking to Eden in the womb, And he's like, why would life is so unfair. I'm just experiencing so much pressure in here. So many difficulties, so many trials. And you're on the outside trying to say, how do I explain this to you? And they have no concept, right? It's the same idea. You have to understand that there's a limit to where God can really explain human suffering and injustice. And it's one of the deeper, darker parts of our Christian experience. It's like, God, if I knew I would love you, I could love you more. I would believe you more if you could explain this. And a lot of people have turned their faith on that one point. Well, I got hurt by this thing and I never, I don't understand, and so I walk away. So it's a real touchy, intentionally, I think it's a really touchy thing. Now, I would also say that suffering has arguably, again, none of us want to admit this, in a big scale, but suffering is arguably one of the great movers of people back to God. Now, again, in no way am I suggesting, let's pray for suffering. And if you want to pray for that, just keep it to yourself. It's not a prayer we should share. But, for instance, I'll give you an example. After, this has been consistent in almost every war America's ever fought in, sans the Civil and Revolutionary War. Those are on our soil. Forget those. In every foreign war we fought in, post-war, more missionaries have gone to those places to preach the gospel than in any other time in their history before that. Fact. Even up to Afghanistan. We've sent more people into Afghanistan. By the way, and I don't mean we as in America, I mean the Church of Jesus Christ. Largest mission agency in the world is the Korean church. They're in everywhere we would you'd be blown away. But so Vietnam, and guess who's, St. Patrick's Day, right? What's the celebration? St. Patrick, right? Right? He was a slave who went back. You'd be amazed at how many, and you can Google it and you can read books about these people, how many former, not only soldiers, but even POWs who would return. There's several from Japan that went back to Japan and served as missionaries there for years and decades. It's a very, very common. So again, this is not me, if your takeaway is, Phil said, the world should suffer. No. But in the reality of human suffering, that's sometimes one of the biggest pushes for open doors than there were before that. So just something to consider, okay? Okay, so chapters 25, 26, and 27, dealing with the issue of the greatness of God, human insignificance, and nobody providing care from Job's perspective. Okay, chapter 28, just a little standalone chapter. It's a hymn. It's a poetic hymn discussing the nature of wisdom. It's one of the more quoted books or one of the more quoted chapters of the book. And it serves as a reflection on the limitations of human wisdom and the necessity of recognizing God's wisdom, divine wisdom. Job 28 is one of those great chapters. Let me see if I can just pull up here what I wrote down on this. Job 28:28, and he said to the human race, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to shun evil, that is understanding. It's one of the great verses of the Old Testament. Job 28:28. So it's a truly if you like poetry and wisdom literature, that's got to be a highlight on your list, okay? Chapters 29 and chapters 30, we look at Job's past glory and Job's present misery. Job gets nostalgic, recalling his former days of respect and prosperity and closeness to God, and then he contrasts them with his current state of suffering and dishonor and what appeared to him to be divine abandonment. Have you noticed as you've read the words of Job that he's moved from, in the beginning, he had a lot more confidence, God's still in this? And then as time goes on and as people speak into his life, he's starting to be maybe God's abandoned me. Right? That just reminds you and me of the power of friendship, Christian friendship. I have the power to turn people in a positive direction or in a negative direction. So I can help someone to get more confidence in God or actually more confusion. And so that's what's happening to Job. As the conversations have worn on more and more, he's like, my life used to be amazing, and now I feel like God's not even here. So it's a pretty dark chapter or 2 chapters for him. And it's underscoring it's like you're just watching Job is going down. He's coming down. And again, that's the power, both positive and negative, that we can have upon each other. We all impact each other. And this is a very dramatic expression of that. But in Job chapter 31, so he's on his way down, and then he just kind of bites. And this is Job asserting his innocence. And he's going to list all of his righteous actions. He's going to challenge anybody who proves wrongdoing. And he's just like, hey, I'm righteous. I've done right. I've done good. I've been right. And the problem with Job chapter 31 is that Job is making a case for innocence rather than just righteousness. Innocence is saying, I'm perfect. Righteousness, like we are in Christ, we are the righteousness of God. We are righteous. But that does not mean innocent. Right? Remember what I shared this on a Sunday, that the goal, like the whole goal of salvation is not a return to innocence, but it is the power of restoration. Heaven is not where we're all a bunch of little, we're not Eden babies that are like innocent. Oh, we don't know anything. We've never done anything. Heaven is filled with people who have had all of that shame taken to the cross. So it's a place of healing and restoration, not innocence. Innocence speaks to like, oh, I've never done anything wrong. You ever talk to somebody who gives you the impression that they're like innocent? Versus that person who's like, yeah, no, like you are, I'm saying this over you. You are righteous in Christ. You are in right standing with God. But that's because of Jesus, not because of some kind of return to innocence that you and I have. We are in the process of being restored. So chapters 32 through 37, big jump. 32 through 37, we're going to read Elihu, just however you like to say his name. How do you say it? How did you like it? Elihu? It's so fun to say, yep. He's the younger one of the group, right? And he rebukes Job and his friends. He's like, I've been listening to you all, and I think you're wrong, and you're wrong, and you're wrong, and Job, you're wrong too. He criticizes Job for justifying himself rather than God. Interesting. And then he criticizes the friends for failing to provide true wisdom. So he presents suffering, and this is really fascinating. He says suffering is potentially corrective and instructive. And so he's on to a really important part of suffering, that it would have an instructive nature to it. Now, if your only concept of suffering comes from Elihu, then you would be wrong, right? Suffering is not always corrective. Jesus was very clear on this, that the sun goes up and down on the righteous and the unrighteous. And that the Tower of Siloam fell on a group of people and killed them all. Were they all unrighteous or were they righteous? I mean, there's no, like, good things happen to bad and good people. Bad things happen to bad and good people. And I know we could say, well, the point is there's nobody good. Just forget that, though. It's just that things happen to everybody. There's no like separation in that sense. And so Elihu has a really great perspective, and I think it's worth understanding it, but you shouldn't think that's the only perspective. So let me start with his perspective, that God uses suffering in a person's life to correct and instruct. We believe that is true. That is a true thing. What we don't believe is that all suffering is necessarily because you needed to be corrected and instructed. There's a difference. Sometimes just bad things happen. And then what are you going to do? That's exactly, I'm going to highlight that, and apologies. That's exactly not the point. That's my point that I'm trying to make. Because learning from it means it's just there to learn from it. But you're correct. We should learn from it, but we can also just say, why does the Bible also say mourn with those who mourn? It doesn't say you should learn from your mourning. It says that sometimes just bad things happen. We can't always try to associate I got to learn something, and if I don't, then I missed the whole point. Sometimes the point is, that sucked. Okay? That was not okay. That was horrible. I think of that just most... Anybody watching the season 4 of The Chosen? Anybody watched it? This is in the Bible. This isn't The Chosen. I just was asking because I just... The story I'm about to tell you, you're like, wait, isn't that in the Bible? It's in the Bible. But I just watched the scene in The Chosen too. But this is a Bible reference here. Ready? When Lazarus died, Jesus didn't offer correction or instruction, did he? He didn't say, let me tell you what you should learn from this. What did he do? Shortest verse in the Bible. He wept. Sometimes bad things happen. And we want to ascribe, we become Elihu. We want to ascribe a moral or intellectual, like teach me something from, I have to learn something, because the thought that it could have just happened and there's no lesson to be learned sounds terrible. But sometimes there is no lesson to be learned. We're just meant to weep with those who are weeping. And if it's you that's one weeping, then weep it up. And not try to Now, listen, back to the main point. Will you and I learn from all of life's, everything that happens? Of course we will. But sometimes we're in such a rush to miss the main point, which is just sometimes you just got to be in the hurt. Right? You got to just if God puts you in the hurt locker, you just got to be in it sometimes. And not be like, how do I wiggle out, or how do I learn the lesson so that if I learn the lesson, because God is trying to test me. And we begin to put all these associations with God upon those things. And that's actually a diminishing of the love of God. You're saying the reason God did this is only to teach you something. He loves you way more than just trying to teach you something. But sometimes bad things happen in life. Did God know it? 100%. Did God allow it? I hate to say this out loud, but yes, he did. But is everything a moral injunction? You got to learn this thing, or you might have to have it happen again, right? We always think if we learn the lesson, it'll never happen again. How many of you had things happen multiple times? Don't raise your hand. Let's raise our hands. We know it, right? Come on now, we can pain together here. The truth of the matter is that there is a philosophical view of nihilism, right? There's nothing good. We don't believe that. But there's also this kind of superficial, simplistic philosophy that says, well, there's a little nugget that you got to learn, and once you learn that, you got the point. But that's not the point. The point is sometimes we just sit in that thing. We wait on the Lord. And so Job is listening to Elihu. Elihu is speaking, and he's introducing, really, honestly, it's kind of a new perspective that he's giving, and so everybody's listening, and he takes a long time to say it. And so we get to chapters 38 all the way to 42, verse 6. Now God's speaking. And then Job responds. Now again, so the thing I would catch your attention to in Job 38 is the Lord answered Job, verse 1, out of the whirlwind. And, okay, so in terms of the voice of God, this is one of those, it's worth mentioning, there's no written records that are, at least not in Job. We have no record of Job knowing the story of God, the story of creation in its, in terms of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus. Okay, we have no record of him. We know he knows God is creator, but all ancient people knew that. Most people in the world know that. The issue is not that, but there's no record of, he doesn't know Moses, or there's no record of that lineage in any way. So we're reading about something post or outside of Abraham and that line, and God is in some way speaking to them. So it's a really powerful thing. And what I want to draw your attention to most about these things is what God does not do. God does not say, okay, guys, I've been taking notes. Bildad, let's start with you. Bildad, stand up. Not yet, at least. He's going to do that in a little bit. And let me work through each point of what you said and give a rebuttal. Instead, what does God do? And this is the most common form of teaching, even still to this day, and for oral learners. He doesn't teach a thing with 3 points. What does he do? He asks questions. He's questioning. Now, we hear questioning and we think like interrogating, right? I was questioned. But it was like, think of it like they would have. This is how God was speaking to them for instruction and for learning. And so he questions Job about creation. Where were you, verse 4, when I laid the foundations of the earth? Like, where were you? And what's the answer to that question? Not there. Not present. Do you understand what I've created and how I've created? Do you understand my power over creation? These are all the questions that God is asking over and over and over. Verse 12, did you command the morning since your days began? Like, did you wake up, Job, and say, sun, go down? Did you command the day? No, you didn't. Verse 16, have you entered the springs of the sea? Have you walked in search of the depths? No. Verse 17, have the gates of death been revealed to you? No. Chapter 39, verse 1, do you know the time when the wild mountain goats bear young? Verse 11, will you trust him because his strength is great? Or will you leave your labor to him? Verse 13, the wings of the ostrich wave proudly, but are her wings and pinions like the kindly storks? He's asking, these guys' brains must have been exploding. They're just being like question after question. Do you understand wind currents? Do you understand ocean currents? Do you understand creation? Do you understand life, birth, death process? Do you understand nature? Do you understand? He's just going on and on and on. And the significance of these questions to Job are this. The gap between man and God is greater than we oftentimes actually realize. The gap between God and man is far, far more distant. I've said this before, but it's worthy to say it again here. When you read the New Testament, we all want to read it from a particular lens. And one of the lenses I think that's an important, like the glasses you put on, there's a certain glass that you want to put on. I would suggest one of the important glasses that you put on when you read the Bible is to not be Jesus in the story when you start reading. So you're like reading about Jesus and the woman on the well. Okay, I got my Jesus glasses on. So what did Jesus say? What did he do? And how can I do that? That's a valid thing to do, but when it's the first thing you do, it gets you into a whole heap of trouble. Here's why. You're diminishing the gap between man and God. You are closer to the woman at the well in character and in nature than we are to God. Let me put it like this. We're more like dead Lazarus than we are like the living Jesus. We share more in common with a dead guy. We share more in common with a Pharisee. We share more in common with the worst people in the Bible than we ever will with the holy God. And that's not a put down of us. It's just a reminder that that gap exists. And the way that God reminded Job and his friends of the gap was, okay, where were you when this happened? Do you understand these things? Can you equate these issues? We didn't understand ocean currencies until not that long ago. And yet here we have in one of the most ancient books in the Bible, and God saying these things, and everybody used to mock the Bible for, it's just philosophy, it's just literature, it's not real. Until all of a sudden oceanographers discovered, no, this is actually a real thing. Right? I always like to say the Bible's not a science book, but the Bible's science is always right. It's always right. Even if we don't know it yet, it's correct. Okay? So the gap between God and man is so great. It is so tremendous. And we're supposed to remember that in our daily lives. In chapter 42, verses 1 through 6, just real quick, and then we'll wrap up the book. Job humbly acknowledges his lack of understanding. Verse 1, Job answered the Lord and he said, I know that you can do everything and that no purpose can be withheld from you. Verse 4, listen, please, and let me speak. You said, I will question you, and you will answer me. I have heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. I abhor myself, and I repent in dust and ashes. That's got to be one of the coolest, those are the coolest Bible verses right there. I heard of you, but now I'm actually seeing you. And in what form, we don't exactly know what that means. And I'm not even sure it necessarily means just visual sight, but like I'm comprehending in ways I never knew before, and I abhor myself. It's the same response that Isaiah would have in Isaiah chapter 6 when he was taken before the throne of God. And the Lord said, who will go for me? And Isaiah said, woe is me, for I am a man of unclean lips and impure heart. Exactly. Send me, Lord, send me, is what Isaiah says. But there's this acknowledgement of like, there's an interesting parallel. When people were in the presence of God, there was awe and then absolute humility and repentance in every time. Awe of God and repentance. From chapter 42, verse 7 to the very end of the chapter, God rebukes Job's friends for their incorrect assumptions. He instructs them to offer sacrifices, asking them to ask Job to pray for them. Job's fortune's restored. He receives double what he had before. The significance of this is that it underscores the themes of divine justice, right? And reconciliation. I think there's a hard pill to swallow that everything Job got in chapter 42 made everything that had happened before that okay, and it did not, right? Wouldn't it be completely shameful if you said to someone like, oh, we know you've had loss, but God made that up. God doesn't make up loss like that. That's not what's actually happening here. It's that God just allowed Job, remember, these people lived forever, first of all. These weren't like 80-year-old, like these dudes lived. And so, these are solid hundreders, they're going for it. Elihu was probably 100, right? And he was the young guy of the group, right? So, and I don't know, but just there's a serious age gap going on here between our understanding and theirs. God did not restore all this fortune and say like, look, I gave it all back to you. That is the epilogue, which means it's the statement that says, and once the devil's attacks were done, Job's life, like once the devil was no longer being given this kind of ability in Job's life, there was only blessing waiting for him. That's the point. Does that make sense? Like when the devil, like God gave the devil permission. And because of that, we just see tremendous pain, tremendous suffering. But when that was then removed, we see the blessings of God begin to reemerge in his life. And that's how the book of Job ends. Okay? Okay. Let's take some questions. And then, of course, like I said, I'll let you listen to Kyle's voice. But yes, ma'am. Which part? Which part?
At the end, when God blesses him, he had that at the beginning, and then he went through the
Right, that God blessed him because of his humility and repentance, yeah.
because he recognized.
Well, God honors humility and repentance, always does. That's a fact, yeah, 100%. Totally. Yes, sir?
Pastor, I think you kind of touched it a little bit, though, but reading just the complaining, the moaning, and all of the things about Job,
I know.
about his righteousness, and you talk about how this is the oldest book. So basically, looking at Job, and God said he was the most righteous man on the face of the earth at that time, doesn't speak well of the existence of all.
Yeah, nobody was very good, yeah. These bunch of bums out there, yeah.
The faith that Job had, that in the end was the thing that he knew it all.
And I would even take it a step further and say it wasn't even his faith, because the Bible says if you have the faith of a mustard seed, right? So that's how terrible we really are. Let's take it real. We're so bad that God says, hey, just believe like just an itsy bitsy, And so I would suggest it's not even that he had that little bit of faith, but it just shows the greatness of God's love. That in it all, God still chose this, There's an idea that I'm still working on it as a process, but there's a boiling over that happens in all humanity when we have that phrase like do you ever say this to your kids, like you've pushed me to the limit, you've pushed me, I can't go any further, right? So in all of every person, and forget the size of the container, but I want you to think of humanity as each containers. All of us have been given, we all contain an element of civility, of human, just like there's a level of kindness, a level of anger, a level of forgiveness, a level of peace, a level of patience, a level of frustration. Like it's just within, like it's just it's the human container. We all have that, right? And there's this fascinating, and I've been really thinking a lot about this. You'll probably hear me talking about it more down the road. Then there's the overflowing, right? The boiling over. Think of it like this. When in Matthew, when Jesus said, out of the abundance of the heart, what? The mouth speaks, right? Is that a positive thing he's referencing or a negative? But in its context, it's bad, right? Adultery, fornication, murder, hate, the idea is that he's saying that when humanity when you can't keep a lid on something, when it comes out, when overflow comes out of humanity, it reveals our sin. But the very same concept, the overflow of God, is where forgiveness, grace, mercy, the power of the Holy Spirit overflowing a person's life. In the same, the container of humanity and its overflow is bad. Out of the abundance. And so, but the abundance of God is where we see healing and wholeness and forgiveness and mercy and justice. So, to the point that you're bringing, David, I would say it's really showing the abundance of a God who was very gracious to these people. So, yes, sir.
So the book gave us examples of friendship during seasons of suffering, albeit they're not the best examples. Right. But how should you be a friend to someone who is suffering? And does that approach change when they're not able to?
Next question. It's a great question. I think I can't give I could say a few things to that, but I think it's a lot bigger and deeper. That's a great question. I don't think Job should be read because sometimes we read it like, don't have a wife like Job and don't be a friend like Job had, And I don't think that's a fair estimate. One, I think Job's wife was just saying, curse God and die so you can stop suffering, right? Just give up so you don't have to be in pain anymore. She's kind of a nice wife. You're in pain. And the ancient world's concept of life and death, they didn't assume he would be gone. They had a better view of eternity than we do today. Like today we're like, oh no, they're gone. And her view is just move on. It's time to move on. You're suffering. Move on to the next thing. Get out of here. Or maybe she hated him. I don't know. I'm just saying I think there's value to that. So I don't think we should read the book of Job and our takeaway should be, which is not what you're saying, but I hear it a lot that the takeaway is like, don't be like Job's friends. The truth of the matter is that they brought out so many brilliant, beautiful concepts, albeit at times wrong, and it forced Job to think and to feel and to move around in ways. I think there's one thing worse than being a bad friend. It's just not being a friend at all. I don't think we should try to be bad friends. Please don't let that be your takeaway for tonight. I may not be a good friend, but at least I'm there. I think we can work to do better, but I think there's a point where we say and I think that a big part of the book of Job is a reminder of the humility of in the end they were all told hey, you're wrong, but they were also present, and they weren't totally wrong, but they were mostly wrong. So I think on this side, and here's the main point too. On this side of the New Testament, we should be very cautious in You know, ultimately the reason that they were bad or they were not great is because they used human wisdom to try to answer divine problems. So the issue is like, I think I need to choose my words, right? I need to choose my words more wisely. And for that, us on the side of the New Testament, that would mean I'm going to make sure that what I'm saying really comes from the heart of God through the Word of God. Like, so I'm not going to just like spout out like my concepts. Really what we read in Job is a lot of concepts from these guys. Kind of brilliant stuff, to be honest. Just not divine wisdom. So I would suggest on this side of, we used to have an assistant pastor when I was at Calvary Costa Mesa. And we used to have to do the church was so large. We used to have to do, all the pastors on staff, we had to do like a 1 day a week, half the day we spend up in the front office answering counseling calls. And you know, again, the church at the time was 30 some odd thousand people. It was just unbelievable. And so we'd just spend time, and I remember the first time I was up there, you know, I'm an idiot kid, and the pastor, the assistant pastor in charge of us all, he's like, all right, people are going to call in, they're going to have a lot of problems, I want you to listen to them, I want you to pray with them, and I want you to just shut your mouths. And just do yourself a favor and do us all a favor. Nobody cares what you have to say. He was a Marine drill sergeant before that, Pastor Romaine. Nobody cares about what you have to say. And just shut up. You know, in your 20 years of existence, you've done nothing. You have nothing to say. So, you know, and so somebody was like, I'm 26. I don't care. You know, and if God gives you a verse to share with them, then share the verse. But then otherwise, just kind of really shut up. And he didn't say kind of really. I'm saying it nicer. And it was really some brilliant advice. And I don't think we need to look at each other and say, I'm only going to quote the Bible to you. But I think I learned a lot about, like, if it's just a good idea, be careful, because it may not be a God thing for that person. And the longer you live, the harder it is to differentiate between, is this a lived experience wisdom? So like Javi goes through something and he learns from God, and then Tony goes through something similar. So Javi goes, let me tell you what to do, but it's not exactly the same. So that advice for what God did in his moment may not work in his moment. So then you go, okay, well, if that's the way it is, I need to be careful with my words, and then I need to just be more biblically inclined. So I think we should step into roles of being friends. I think we should step into roles of speaking. I think that we should probably be saying more things like, I don't even really know what to say. Maybe we should go talk to somebody else about this together. Like the thing that I think the Bible speaks more to on friendship is the power of presence more than the power of wisdom. So a friend sticks closer than a brother, right? There is a friend that sticks closer than a brother. And we know that that's Jesus, but we could be like that. So I think there's a value to creating. Most friendships are really just glorified acquaintances. We're not really actually going deep. So a friendship, I would say, is a relationship where we would open up to a person for help and for, I'm looking for wisdom, right? Yeah. It's a great question, Victor. Subpar. You guys want to hear Kyle's voice?
Our Pastor Carlos, whoever's teaching. So, when God said,
I can't speed it up.
he's rebuking the guys, the three friends, he's like, you have not spoken accurately, but my servant Job, he has spoken accurately. It's difficult to apply any theological, doctrinal, teachings from Job then. So when I'm reading through it, I don't know how to really make a lot of application if all these guys are all saying the wrong things about God and life. So how do you really read and interpret Job and make personal application? And second question, I heard ones from like these scholars who know Hebrew. They said that Job isn't saved when they're looking at the original language. So is Job saved? Because when I read it, God's like really proud of his servant. So assuming that he's saved, and everything Job says, he just talks about how much he loves the Lord. So those are my two questions. Thanks. Love you guys.
So there's Kyle. Hi, Kyle. We love you. Okay. Answer to question number 2. Nobody was saved. There was no salvation in that way. You can't use a New Testament truth in an Old Testament context. It's not, nobody was saved. But will he be in heaven? The answer is yes. But again, he's saved by faith in what God will do, but not in what he had done. So is he saved? Of course, just that's not the language we would be using. So if they're saying, if a Hebrew, I don't know why a Hebrew scholar would be getting into that, but he's not saved, that's not the language we use to describe. You don't say Abraham was saved, but he was righteous because of what God said and did in his life. So it's a different way of describing it. But will Job be in heaven? The answer is yes. I put Job in heaven way above even some of the kings of Israel. So, yeah, Job will be in heaven. The second point, and that's the first question that he asked, and it's a good one that comes up a lot. How are you supposed to, what are your takeaway nuggets from the book of Job when most everything that was said isn't true or may not be true? So what you do is you use a simple interpretive skill, and that is, if God said it, let's believe it. Outside of that, these are narratives these are conversations between people. They said really good things, but not necessarily God things. That's really important. They're good. It teaches us something, but it's not a full picture. And because it's not a full picture, that does not, there's so many things in the Bible, we read it, and if you, in a narrative, and it doesn't mean that it was right. Paul the Apostle mocks the high priest. And they slap him and say, how dare you mock the high priest? They're like, I didn't know he was the high priest. I didn't know he was the anointed of God. And then I've heard people, their takeaway is, you can do that. When that's not the takeaway. So what is the takeaway? Well, you got to, how does Jesus react in those moments? We actually know how Jesus reacted when he saw the high priest. What did Jesus do when he was with the high priest? He said nothing. He made no statements like that. So, when you're in a situation, your response, the Apostle Paul did it, that's not a high enough standard. So certainly the words of Bildad and Zophar and Elihu and so on, these are not, you cannot build doctrine around them. You read it and you say, this is what humanity looks like when we are trying to discover the wisdom of God when we have not heard from the voice of God. So it's like trying to figure out how you should live your life but avoiding the Bible. That's the book of Job. Because they didn't have the Bible. So it's worse today. But I'm going to figure out how to live my Christian life. I believe in God, I believe in Jesus, but I'm going to figure out how to live out my life, and I'm going to avoid the Bible as a foundation. That's the wisdom of those guys. So avoid it at all costs. Okay. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Okay, so I want to understand that, I think this is what you said. God is not always expecting us to learn something from all suffering.
Yeah, I'll repeat it. God is not expecting us to learn something from all suffering. That's what I said, yes. You want me to clarify that?
Yeah, because sometimes that's one of the reasons people walk away from God is that maybe they misunderstand. He never answered this one.
Yeah.
And so I'm done because he didn't answer this one. And that's a misunderstanding that makes people walk away from God quite a bit.
And I'm going to separate those two things. The first one, let me say, I believe we all learn things from everything. But when the thing is I have to learn that lesson, as if it's like a test I'm being given, that I don't agree with when it comes to suffering. I will learn from every part of life if I choose to learn, right? It's like I'm being discipled by everything if I let everything disciple me. Like if I let God speak to me in good and bad, he will. But the idea that that is why that happened, I reject. The Bible rejects that concept. In terms of hurt and those things, I would even suggest, because I believe in the sovereignty of God, that if somebody's in that moment, they're like, I turned away. You're talking to a friend, and I turned away from God because God didn't answer me on that. I would suggest to you that this circle back to that moment that you're getting to have with that person, that's the Lord. And it might be that that very moment could be the thing that then now reveals what it was that was happening. That might be the moment that God uses to say, oh, you were hurting then. Let's unpack that. What did that feel? What were you going through? Let's talk about it. right? So it doesn't have to be that they missed the lesson then and that's why they walked away from God, or that God failed them because he didn't answer. Because, so often I feel like God fails me. I'm just using this as an example. I feel like God fails me because he didn't answer the way I wanted him to answer. So all of a sudden when you circle back around and now you got somebody else to do that with in your life. And so I think we have to be so cautious with people that are angry. People that are angry at God are really our best. They're close. Because anger comes from a place of care. The difference between caring and anger is real close. Like I said on Sunday, apathy is real tough to break through. Real tough. But anger is so strong, and it's like, well, why are you so angry? Why are you so angry at God? God didn't answer me. Okay, so you believe God. You believe there's a God. Of course I believe there's a God, but he didn't, he failed me. Let's unpack that. And then the fun thing about being a Christian in those moments is I don't have to defend God. He doesn't need a lawyer. What I get to do is just walk with that person through their process in that moment, and then let God bring out how I could speak into their life in that. It might be, gosh, I'm so sorry that happened to you. I don't know why. I don't know why that. But are you going to base an entire decision about God on that one moment of your life? And then you're going to let all the rest of them fall into that same, you know what I'm saying? Like, you just unpack those things with people. But give me an angry person any day over an apathetic one. If I were to walk and start a conversation, we're talking to, hey, yeah, dude, I'm a Christian. Oh, I hate that stuff. That bleepity, bleepity, bleep. Ooh, we're going to have a good conversation. But if that person's like, oh, good for you, it's a lot harder. We'll get there, but it's a lot harder. Yeah, Michael.
So God doesn't answer Job's question essentially why did this happen?
No.
He could.
God could have answered them, but he did not. That's correct, yeah.
Isn't God's unspoken question to
Yes.
Job really, do you trust me?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Yeah. Yeah, you're going to have to trust me. Yep. It's the parallel would be John 10. Martha, if you would have been here, my brother would not have died. Jesus says, I'm resurrection and life. He who believes in me will not suffer, but have eternal life. Do you believe this? Like, it's a turn back. Like, can you trust me? It always comes back down to that. All of life's issues come back down to, can I just trust God? As difficult as it might be, can I trust God? And it's hard to do.
So in chapter 42, it doesn't say that he ever told him why.
No, he never gave him an answer. No, God never answered. Listen, if he did then, Job held on to the most important question every human being has ever, there's two questions everybody wants to know. Why am I suffering and where do I go when I die? And if Job held that to the grave, curse that man, We're all going to punch him in the face when we get to heaven. So, no, he did not get an answer. God never answers the question to the satisfaction of humanity, ever. He gives certain people certain answers that made them able to trust God better, but he never fully engaged in the answer. There is no answer on this side of heaven.
I kind of feel like there's an answer, but it was given to Satan when God proclaims, have you seen
My servant Job. But it's still not an answer to human suffering. It doesn't explain why children have this, have that happen. It doesn't explain why. It doesn't explain it. It just is a reminder that we live in a spiritual world. But it's certainly not an answer to humans. I mean, again, keep in mind, guys, it's a Wednesday night. We're taking 15 minutes of questions. This is literally the question that all philosophers and theologians have been trying to answer for 2,000 years. And there's been beautiful expressions. I don't think it's a wasted time, but the most beautiful understandings of these things have ultimately concluded is, it's Solomon was the wisest person, and his conclusion was, remember your Creator in your youth. So if there's anything that's going to really answer the question, it's know God. Trust God. But again, that's not the answer to why things happen. It's the best approach to moving forward in suffering, is to know God. So, we take one more question. You guys are brilliant. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Totally. It's a gaslight right there, yeah. It's like therapy, right? I'm so angry. Well, why are you angry? I'm the one that. yeah. Right? Okay. So why is that? Okay, that's a great question. And I might be circling back to some things that we had already kind of said, but remember, they didn't think of questioning back then. Questioning was not a form of interrogation or passive aggressiveness. It was a way of communicating an answer. So it is the answer. It's just not the answer to all human suffering. But it is the answer of like, where were you? I want you to see that you're not me, so you can't. Here's the passive aggressive part. Ready? It is kind of passive. Here's the passive part. You can't handle the truth. Some of you are old. You know that now. Right? And I'm not thinking of you, but just he's saying you can't handle the truth. So instead of just saying that, he's like, and again, we kind of read it. We even read into it like it's an interrogation. Like it's like the bright light came on and the cop was like, where were you on the night of January 7th, you know? It's like, it's probably more like, hey, Job, let's have a conversation about this. Where were you in this? Oh, I never thought of that, right? So I think there's less, it's certainly in we got to be careful that we don't appropriate the way that they would do that then into our way today. Questioning is questioning. It's not a good thing. But it's still a part of like Socratic method. We still use it in teaching today. Like the best teachers are still asking questions to draw the answers out of their students. Think of it more like that than God like, well, where were you? And what did you? It's more like, let's work this through. Like, hey, Job, this morning, did you make the sun rise? You know? You know what I mean? I think think of it more like that. But you're right. And it's one of the harder things to do, man, because we don't have a lot of, you have to really dig into ancient literature to understand their conversations were different. Again, the whole Socratic method, and that was thousands of years after this. This idea of I'm going to use questions as a way of inciting information and knowledge. But it wasn't meant to be passive aggressive at all. I see your hand. I'll let you go with one question. Go ahead. Yeah.
Then is it okay to question God?
Is it okay to question God? We're always questioning God. Sometimes we're just honest about it. So, should we question God? Yes. Questioning is not the same. Oh gosh, one of the greatest people in the Bible was Thomas. He asked the questions we all wanted to know. And then we call him Doubting Thomas, but honestly, we're like, good question, bro. You're like, oh, that's Doubting Thomas, but yeah, buddy, I wanted to know that too. Jesus never rebukes Thomas for asking these kinds of questions or doubting. God doesn't mind, listen, we're already doubting God. Better to ask. And exactly, everything is known and naked before the eyes of the Lord, so it's better to, the only person we're really lying to is ourselves most of the time. We're really just lying to ourselves, like I trust God so much. Lord, I'll never deny you, says Peter. Even though all these losers, my interpretation, exactly, I'll never deny you. Sometimes people will come to me like, I'll see somebody new at the church, not just here, but like in all the churches I've been a part of, and they're like, oh, this is the greatest, this is the best church, this is the great. I'll never see them again. Because honestly, when we do that kind of thing, we're trying to prove something to ourselves. It's not God we're questioning, it's actually, I don't even know if I believe it. So it's a really good habit to get into, to question God. Now again, when the Bible gives the answer and you don't like it, that's on me, right? Like for instance, it's not a question of, I can question, God, do you love me? But the answer's there. And if I don't like the answer, yes, Jesus loves me. Before the foundation of the world, Christ died for my sins. He made a way so that I could have an eternal relationship with him, and not just for eternity, but right now God cares about my existence. Now, if I don't like that answer, I'm no longer questioning, I'm just disbelieving. That make sense? So if I know the answer and I don't like the answer and I don't want to believe the answer, that's just unbelief. But questioning is not the problem. Unbelief is a problem. Questioning is not. So that's again why I like people that are like, they're going to challenge God. Let's go. Let's challenge God. God's up for the task. If we need everybody to be placid and just like, hey, the Bible says Jesus loves you and he died for you and you should become a Christian. Great, sign me up. Wait, do you even know what we're talking about yet? No, I like what you just said. Can we talk more about this? No, I'm ready to be a Christian. Can we have a little, I think somebody who's kind of challenging and wondering, that's okay. They're not far. But unbelief is a problem. Unbelief is the issue. But doubting is, the opposite of doubt is not faith, right? Unbelief and faith would be on that. Sometimes doubting the next moment is absolute radical faith in God. So, you guys did amazing tonight. I'm so proud of us all. We finished Job. Okay, so remember, you're reading Psalms on your own. Okay, just because it's not in our reading plan. Carlos and I weren't smart enough to figure out how to get it in there, right? So you just got to read it on your own. So we're going to just keep going. We're getting into, it's going to be so fun. We got some great stuff going. So keep at it. Don't give up. Don't lose heart. This is the really fun stuff. And I mean, we're going to finish the year. We're going to get through it all. It's going to be unbelievable. So. Yeah, it's going to be Proverbs that we're going to look at next Wednesday. Are we doing all of Proverbs? I am doing Psalms, but I'm not reading. You can't do it in 3 weeks. I'm going to teach Psalms. You're right. We're going to teach some of the Psalms, but you can't read it that'd be 50 a week, including 119 into that grouping. So we love you too much. And also, we want you to keep reading, and the Bible plan's going to jump ahead to Proverbs, so that by the time we finish, you're going to have finished Proverbs, and we're going to be ready to talk about it. So we're going to kind of get a little bit ahead. Sorry, thanks, dude, because I almost forgot. Yeah, let me pray. Lord, thank you so much for the time to be in your word. Thank you for the book of Job. Thank you, Lord. There is, one thing that amazes me, God, is the level of human wisdom. We're sometimes wrong, but it's incredible how much wisdom, I'm amazed at human ingenuity. But Lord, it just pales compared to your wisdom. It's so small. Human wisdom is so much smaller. It's not bad, it's not wrong, it's so much smaller that your wisdom sometimes, Lord, seems like foolishness. That's how you described it. Foolishness to the Greeks, to the Jews. But it is the power of God unto salvation. And so, Lord, we want to keep growing in human ingenuity, not separating ourselves from you, but we just want to keep growing as people. But, Lord, we need your wisdom for our lives. And tonight, we just pause to say, we trust you. Sometimes it feels better to look at somebody else's pain, like Job. But if we just stop and we consider our own frustrations, we just want to say tonight, Lord, that we trust you. I want to encourage you to do that in your own heart. Let's just believe God. Believe God for good in our lives, for wisdom, for grace, for mercy, for peace, for help in our times of need. We're just going to believe you, God. We trust you. And Lord, we say as that one guy whose son was demon-possessed, I believe, but help my unbelief. So where I lack faith, help me. In Jesus' name, amen.